From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Special Counsel John Durham drops his report on the FBI's 2016 investigation into then-candidate Donald Trump. What have we learned from it, and what's to stop the FBI from making the same mistakes again? Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues, columnist Kim Strassel and editorial board member Kate Batchelder-Odell. On Friday, Special Counsel John Durham submitted his report to the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. It has now been released in full, 316 pages in all. A little bit of bedtime reading for America this week. I at least am still digesting this report, but it seems to me, Kim, like a very clear narrative with a lot of useful information. The special counsel's office says it conducted 480 interviews. It received 6 million pages of documents, served 190 subpoenas, and executed 7 search warrants. And here is just a piece of the takeaway. Based on the review of Crossfire Hurricane and related intelligence activities, we conclude that the department and the FBI failed to uphold their important mission of strict fidelity to the law. Durham also says our investigation revealed that senior FBI personnel displayed a serious lack of analytical rigor toward the information that they received, especially information received from politically affiliated persons and entities, which of course means those affiliated with the Democratic candidate in the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton. So, Kim, what is your takeaway from this report, and what sticks out to you here? I mean, again, it's 316 pages, so there's a lot to grab onto.
So this is a public service that John Durham has done. Some of the information in this report we had already seen as part of Durham's prosecutions of Russian national Igor Danchenko and Democratic lawyer Michael Sussman. Both of those men had been accused of lying to the feds. Unfortunately, Mr. Durham lost both of those cases, but he laid out a really important narrative as part of those indictments in which we finally got the tale of how the Hillary Clinton campaign, working with foreign nationals and an opposition research firm and Democratic power brokers, fed this web of lies about Russia collusion to the FBI and to the media. I think what's really important about this report is it's now looking at the other side of it. Those cases were about the actions of those individuals and what the Clinton campaign had done. This report is much more looking at the FBI side of it, and it's is unsparing in its criticism, basically, essentially saying that the FBI allowed itself to become part of this political dirty trick. That the big takeaway for me was that there was absolutely no basis to even begin this investigation. The FBI jumped most of its protocols to initiate a full investigation, even though there was no evidence from any pocket of the government, from their own FBI experts, from the CIA, from the NSA, from the State Department, that there was any evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. And then he recounts all the many ways in which the FBI closed its eyes to evidence coming in showing that they were on the wrong track, the bias that was involved in it, and some of the other mistakes they made. It's really a pretty damning indictment of the FBI and its leadership at the time, because let's remember this was a close hold done out of a small investigatory team in headquarters in Washington that was overseen by Andrew McCabe and Jim Comey, the leadership at the time.
On the point about the predicate for opening this investigation, Durham essentially says that it was hearsay. It was something that was reported, a comment reportedly made in a tavern by George Papadopoulos, an unpaid foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign, but that he says, based on the evidence gathered in the multiple exhaustive and costly federal investigations of these matters, including the instant investigation, neither U.S. law enforcement nor the intelligence community appears to have possessed any actual evidence of collusion in their holdings at the commencement of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. And so, Kate, I mean, that suggests to me that there was a suspicion of this political newcomer, and there was this thing that came in about a comment overheard by an unpaid foreign policy advisor, and they went to town on it without really critically thinking through what else they had. They didn't consult other agencies. And what's notable about that finding by Durham, I think, is that it comes in contrast to some reporting about the Inspector General's report, which suggested that the investigation may have been justified, and that received some pushback at the time, including by Attorney General Bill Barr. But notable that Durham says that there was no reason for this investigation to begin in the first place.
Yeah, Kyle. I mean, to Kim's point, I think a lot of the actors in this story are hoping that the public has moved on and that they are unable to follow the many twisting details of this story. But I think to Kim's point about accountability, this is an important exercise because it's an example of law enforcement being basically drawn into partisan ends. An example that, to your point about no basis of opening the investigation, Durham says that, like to Kim's point, that if the FBI had checked with their own experienced Russian analysts, they would have learned that there was no evidence of Trump being involved with Russian leadership officials. And the same is true of CIA, NSA, and the State Department. The other point that I'm seeing a lot that I find interesting is some on the left are arguing, oh, well, it's no big deal that they skipped straight to a real investigation and jumped those hurdles that Kim's describing in a preliminary investigation. Well, Durham lays out how the FBI treated some allegations involving the Hillary Clinton campaign, and it couldn't be more different. You know, they offer the Hillary campaign a defensive briefing on foreign influence, and there are allegations involving the Clinton Foundation, and the agency basically is nervous to act on some of these allegations in the run-up to the election because they don't want to influence the election. So there is all of this reluctance shown there, and it's just, at best, it's a very obvious double standard. So I do think that there are some really compelling illustrations in this report, despite the attempt so far to say, nothing to see here. Durham didn't uncover anything we didn't already know.
Kim, there's also some evidence that Durham provides that there was intelligence floating around that the Hillary Clinton campaign had decided on a strategy of trying to tie Donald Trump to Russia as a way to distract from the controversy surrounding Hillary Clinton's private email server. Can you explain what Durham says on that point?
Yeah, this is more information than we've had on this up until now, although I would note that it's still quite fuzzy. There is a classified attachment to this Durham report. By the way, I should say, as an aside, he and his team clearly worked very hard to make sure that the bulk of the report was written in such a way that it could be fully released to the public, rather than sometimes we see these special counsels put out reports and you get a very highly redacted version. There is a small classified attachment to this, and apparently that has the actual text of whatever this intelligence was. But we do get a description of it. And apparently what it was is it was intelligence that was taken possession of by the U.S. government in July of 2016, early July of 2016. And it seems as though this might have been an intercept of Russian intelligence. So that puts a certain cast on it. But apparently this intelligence suggested that Hillary Clinton had personally signed off on a proposal from one of her foreign policy advisors to attempt to tarnish Donald Trump and cause mischief by tying him to the Russian intelligence services. We don't know how well the intelligence community vetted this, but apparently it was concerning enough that the former CIA director, John Brennan, briefed the President of the United States on it, Barack Obama, the Vice President, the Attorney General at the time, Loretta Lynch, and also FBI Director Jim Comey. And yet, despite this kind of clear possibility that had been laid out for the U.S. federal law enforcement, that there might actually be a plan for the Clinton campaign to attempt to tie Trump to Russia. In fact, a plan that was executed on, as it turned out. The FBI just completely ignored this. And the Durham report spends a lot of time asking people, various people that were higher up obviously knew and didn't seem to ever flag it to anyone down below. And then there were people who worked on the case who didn't even know this, were never even told this. And when they were finally told it by Durham's team as part of their interviews, were quite upset that they had never been told about it. So just one of many examples of situations where the FBI was given some evidence to suggest that it had a political problem, that it was engaging and working on behalf of political actors, and yet closed its eyes to it.
And let me read a portion of that piece that Kim is talking about, where the special counsel is showing this evidence to people working on the Trump investigation. And I'm sorry this is a long piece, but the office showed portions of the Clinton plan intelligence to a number of individuals who were actively involved in the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. After reading it, Supervisory Special Agent 1 became visibly upset and emotional, left the interview room with his counsel, and subsequently returned to state emphatically that he had never been apprised of the Clinton plan intelligence and had never seen the aforementioned referral memo. Supervisory Special Agent 1 expressed a sense of betrayal that no one had informed him of the intelligence. The office cautioned him that this intelligence about the Clinton plan had not been verified or corroborated, and he responded firmly that regardless of whether its contents were true, he should have been informed of it. And so, Kate, some of this just looks like clear bungling by the FBI. The right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing.
Well, sure, Kyle, there is certainly an element of bungling to it. But there are things in this report that are hard to chalk up as bungling. When you look at what Durham has to say about the Steele dossier, and so that is the group of salacious reports that the FBI uses to get a warrant on Carter Page, the Trump aide. And there's just all sorts of red flags on this dossier not being corroborated. And the report even says at one point they offer Christopher Steele $1 million to corroborate and near the underlying evidence, and he's unable to do so. We know the source of that dossier now, Dichenko, was also unreliable for a lot of reasons. They update these warrants on Carter Page multiple times at the FISA court to get a warrant to tap him. And even though it looks more and more obvious that they are being duped and that this dossier is unreliable, that doesn't change what the FBI does. So there are things here that just look like really bad, worse than bad judgment. And I think Durham really establishes, for instance, that many of the people involved had profound animus towards Trump personally.